Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to talk about this proxy war business. If it is a proxy war, there must be a sponsor, there must be a patron, a benefactor, someone that supports the proxy against their adversary. And that seems to be an issue right now for the EU. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to talk about the Ukraine conflict again from a different perspective. And I think it's one I haven't heard many people talk about, but I think it's kind of obvious. And that is the issue of Ukraine as a proxy war, because the fact that it's a proxy war implies that it's sandwiched between two powers, right? It implies that there is a target for the proxy army, the proxy country, etc., to assault, to attack, to somehow damage. But that in and of itself implies that on the other side of the proxy, that there is some kind of a benefactor, a patron, whether they're paying money, whatever the case may be. The patron, the benefactor, will be motivating somehow the proxy, right, the tool that they're using to somehow harm the adversary. And that's where Ukraine has been. Let's start off by taking a look at a couple of various, let's look at a couple of things that we can see so we can kind of get a context to start off with. We can go back as far as, come on, let's go back as far as May 7th, 2022, keeping in mind that the Russia entered the conflict. There was already a hot conflict going on. Russia entered the conflict in February of 2022, in late February. As early as May, Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton referred to the conflict as a proxy war. The United States is engaged in a proxy war with Russia, through the conflict in Ukraine, and it's a war the U.S. has to win, says Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton. He made the comment on Fox News on Tuesday. At the end of the day, we've got to realize that we are at war, but not just at war to support Ukraine, but fundamentally, although somewhat through a proxy, we are at war with Russia. So, there was a couple of admissions here. One of them is that the United States government had started a war illegally. If, in fact, we are at war with Russia, that implies that at some point a war was started, the first shot was fired, whatever the case may be. Certainly what that means is that the United States government, that the Biden administration in particular, started a war without running it through the Constitution. Well, through the constitutional requirements. They had to go to Congress. Only Congress can declare war. He didn't say we're having a police action or anything like that. He didn't say we're supporting a country. He said we are at war with Russia through Ukraine as a proxy. That's clear, right? That was when the war first started. That was the position of the U.S. Congress. Let's continue on. We got more than that. How about we go here? Lindsey Graham calls Russians dying the best money the U.S. has spent, right? So there we go. And the bottom line was this: there was video and of Lindsey Graham saying that. Now, of course, they tried in various ways to. There's the video right there. Calls Russians dying the best money U.S. has spent in the Zelensky meeting, right? So again, what do we have? We've got a member of Congress who is a Democrat saying we are at war with Russia using a proxy, right? We also have another member of the other party saying we're spending money for Russians to die. It's the best money we've spent, right? Again, all of this implies a proxy war, right? Now, why do I go there? Because, let me see, do we have anything here? Let's go here. Something has happened that I think that caused me to think about it this way and to feel that it needed to be addressed. Kiev Independent. Trump's foreign aid freeze stranded independent media in Ukraine. Here's how you can help. So what's going on here? There's the Trump administration has done some freezing of funds here, domestic and foreign aid. Excuse me. You can agree with it. You can not agree with it. That's irrelevant here. Here's what's going on. The Ukrainians we have now found out that the Ukrainians are saying, look, they said it probably made sense on paper. They're talking about this. Ukraine was among the many countries receiving the aid distributed through the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, which everybody knows who knows anything about foreign policy, that's a CIA proxy, right? And they said the aid paid for bomb shelters and hospital equipment, mental health programs. Isn't it interesting? Wouldn't it be nice if we could have that aid to pay for those things here in the United States? Agriculture, small farms, you name it, right? All these things going on. But guess what? One of the things that it cost, dearly was media. Let's look at this. So Ukraine says we lost a lot of USAID money. Let's take a look. The Malaysian Sun, nearly all Ukrainian media dependent on U.S. cash, NGO chief. 90% of outlets rely on foreign aid, and over 80% has been funded by USAID, the head of Ukraine's Institute of Mass Information said, right? The vast majority of Ukrainian media have been kept in business in recent years only thanks to foreign grants. We know what that means, with most of the funding coming from the United States Agency for International Development, according to Oksana Romaniak, the head of the Institute of Mass Information NGO last week. President Trump's issued an executive order, 90-day suspension. You get the picture, right? 90% of Ukrainian media, listen to this, almost 90% of Ukrainian media survived on grants, Romaniak said, adding that at least 80% of outlets in the country had received funds from USAID. Several Ukrainian media products and outlets, including, they got here, have suspended projects or seeking emergency funding, right? American grants were key, adding that European institutions remain. I hope they will step in the new approach. Okay, so what happened here? When Trump did that, most of the Ukrainian media folded. Without U.S. money, most of the Ukrainian media fell apart, folded. They run off of U.S. money. U.S. government money and CIA money, pretty much like the U.S. media. Something else you might want to take into account. Let's go back and see if there's more to this. Let's go back again. We'll go backwards. This is July 8th, 2022. So that's February, March, April, May, June, July. Four months, right around a little over 4.5 months after the conflict. Fired up after the Russians entered the conflict. But look at this. Zelensky has consolidated Ukraine's TV outlets and dissolved rival political parties, right? And you go there, Ukraine has had to take extraordinary measures to fight Russia's invasion. Amongst them, the government has consolidated the country's television outlets and dissolved rival parties. It says it needs to do this to maintain a united front, right? Here's the thing. Before the war, Ukraine had a dizzying array of television news stations, but in March, President Zelensky decided to consolidate them into one 24-hour channel, but not all stations were included. This is the swanky studio for Kiev-based television station, whatever, which means direct. It was once owned by former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. He was also a political competitor of Zelensky and prime. Okay, so what happened? After the conflict started, within 4 months, Zelensky pretty much closed down all the TV stations, radio stations, and said, okay, they're all government stations. Now, but we also see something that says 90% of the media in that country lived off of US dollars. Now, if you say the media or the government, it's irrelevant, because we also know that the United States government is paying the salaries of the government employees, the salaries of policemen, firemen, paying the pensions, paying everything. The United States government basically has adopted the Ukraine as a goose-stepping stepchild. Not a red-headed stepchild, a goose-stepping stepchild. That's what Ukraine is. Now, look at that. We were already paying all of the bills, period. Okay. their so-called independent media. Here's my question. If 90% of the independent media, as a number of these stories report, if 90% of the independent media is paid for by the U.S. government, how can we refer to them as as independent media? Right now, I mean, I wish you'd look at my Google Analytics. I am so banned, shadow banned. I mean, I'll get like 30,000 views, 38, 40,000 views. I look and I've like got like 2 subscribers. You know what I mean? I mean, it's so obvious. They like everything's cut so bad for me. I even have evidence, I'm going to run it again soon, wherein I looked in my analytics and they literally showed that it was my views dropped by 40%, and the analytics showed that YouTube dropped their feed, dropped by 40%. That I dropped by 40% the amount that I was showing up in the YouTube feed, and at the same time, my views dropped 40%. And when I showed that in the video, the next day YouTube changed it. Right. So we know the story when it comes to, you know, how the government addresses things that they don't want said and things that they do want said. So I'm supposed to believe that the USAID, which is USCIA, is paying for independent media, and as we already know, paying for all media, government media, so-called independent media, and I'm supposed to believe that it's independent. Right now, if you found out that I was receiving money from the CIA for this elaborate studio that I'm in, right, which is like an old bedroom that this was once a bedroom, but now it's, you know, it's an okay office. It's a little jumbled, but, you know, my brain is a little bit jumbled. We ADD people have jumbled offices, right? But my point being this, it ain't all that jumbled, but to me it is. But my point being, if you found out that Garland Nixon was getting paid by the CIA, wouldn't you kind of figure that he was a CIA mouthpiece? That perhaps you should consider that some of the things that he's saying has been motivated, shall we say, information provided by, you know, nefarious entities? I would certainly suspect that you would. And you should. But I ain't, so you can't, right? So here's my point. The fact that Zelensky reorganized the media and that the media in that country fired everything and turned it into all state media, and the fact that that media is being paid for by you, America, should tell you that, and might I add, it's used to attack people like us who challenge the narrative, should tell you what's going on here. We know the game. It's a proxy war. It's a puppet state. And this is nothing but a gigantic propaganda operation that you, my friends, are funding, but not anymore. Donald Trump said, nah, we're cutting off foreign aid. Now, you can agree with all of it or some of it. It doesn't matter right now. People can gripe and say he should have or he shouldn't have. That is not relevant to this conversation. What's relevant to this conversation is we have, I believe, through just a few quick newspaper articles, demonstrated that the government, the United States government, the Congress, considered this a proxy war against Russia. That I considered it. I was open a proxy war against Russia. That most of the independent media that I know did. That the people in the chat, and most people saw this as a proxy war against Russia. Then why shouldn't we, if our own government tells us it's a proxy war against Russia, and all the evidence points to that? Now, what happens? What do we find out? When money gets cut from Kiev, we find out that all of their media was paid for by CIA, cut out the USAID. Now they got no media. They're laying people off. Hey, they're just like CNN. I wonder if they cut off. I wonder if that cut off CNN's money also. All jokes aside, no, they're just CNN. Who the hell would watch that? I mean, yesterday somebody told, I think it was Jamal Thomas, was saying, "Hey, what do you think about, you know, Bob Acosta quit?" No, wait a minute, Matt Weinglass. I was doing an interview and he said, "Hey, I just got a notice that Jim Acosta quit. What do you think of that?" I said, "The only way you know is if you got a notice from a friend, because nobody sure as hell's watching CNN. How else would we know? Jim Acosta quit. Who? Jim what? Huh? CNN. What's that? Nobody's watching it. So he could quit. He could come back in the same day 5 times. Who'd know it? Nobody's watching CNN anymore. It is done." And from the looks of things, So is the media in Ukraine, which means that maybe the Ukrainians will have an opportunity to do something that we don't have, and that is to view a media that's not paid for and completely controlled by the CIA. That's something that maybe they'll get it in Ukraine. We don't have it here in the United States, but we pray for it, and we hope that one of these days we can get it. Something other than putzes like me standing around with a bunch of stinking books behind a book in a bookshelf, doing the best he can to make sense of the world. So let's continue. Here's the issue. Here's where we are. This is the big one, right? This is the big one. This is the big discussion. This is the big part of all of this that's sitting on our shoulders right now. If Ukraine is a proxy war, and it is, the leader, the very, very powerful leader of the benefactor, the patron, the sponsor, which is the United States, the leader of this country, the president of this country, and Donald Trump is the president and one of the most powerful presidents in my lifetime. Donald Trump does have one of the, maybe not the most, but one of the most, he does have the Congress in both houses, upper and lower house, both the House and the Senate. He does have an absolute majority on the Supreme Court. He has, beaten the media to pieces where that's crumbling. His party better certainly knuckle under to him, because he can get anybody he wants primaried and out the door if they don't go along with what he says. And there's words that, from what I understand, some people who may vote against RFK Jr. may get primaried. But he's a very, very powerful man right now. And Donald Trump ain't the kind of guy that pretend he's weak when he's got power. When he knows he's got power, he's going to use it. So a very, very powerful president, one of the most politically powerful presidents in our lifetime, despises Zelensky and wants out of this war, which means if it even is a proxy war anymore, can we call it that? Doesn't a proxy have to have a sponsor? Right? I mean, think about this, just logically speaking. If the sponsor no longer wants the proxy to act as a tool against an adversary, if the leader of the sponsored country, in this instance, Donald Trump, doesn't see Russia as an adversary, think about that. Donald Trump says, I got nothing against Russia. Yeah, he kind of likes Putin. He's got nothing against him. Ready to meet with them. Trump wants, think about this. Here's one thing that is hard to deny. Donald Trump wants that war over. Now, you can argue that he's not going about it right to get it over. You can argue that Donald Trump is going about it wrong, is going about it right. You can argue all that. You can say he could do better. He's doing foolish things. Whether or not Donald Trump is acting in a manner that will get this war over, is acting in the best interest, knows everything he needs. Those are all the discussions, but I think it's pretty clear. Trump wants out of the war. May not be able to get out. He may, right? But he wants out. Doesn't like Zelensky. I think Trump has got bigger fish to fry right now. He's got things he wants to do. He wants to take over the Panama Canal. He wants to take over Greenland. God knows what, everything in this hemisphere he probably wants to take over, right? Trump obviously wants to, it looks to me, turn the U.S. into some kind of a powerful regional actor, you know what I mean? And just really lock down everything in the regions and continue to be a world power because it's such a powerful regional actor. Maybe get Greenland so we can have influence in the Arctic and access to maybe, whatever's there, be it gas or oil or natural resources, you name it, right? So Donald Trump has his plans. The plans I probably don't agree with. But from the looks of things, I think Donald Trump sees Zelensky as a pain in the butt, and as really an adversary, because it's obvious that Donald Trump feels that not only was Ukraine used as a tool to go after Russia, it was also to some extent used as a tool to go after him. And it was, and I could sit here and make an argument how Ukraine was used as, he was impeached, and he made a perfectly valid claim against Biden and his family in Ukraine, saying, hey, it appears that they've been up to no good and it needs an investigation. That was not an unreasonable claim to say, to make. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, it's irrelevant. It was a reasonable claim, and he got impeached over it. And I don't think Donald Trump is the forgetting and forgiving type. So it's pretty clear to me. I don't know how you see it. You don't have to agree, but it's pretty clear to me that Trump wants out of Ukraine, that he's got other things he wants to do. And he wants to get that out of the way so he can grab Denmark, and whatever else he can grab, right? So here's my point. Who God only knows what kind of thing he wants to do in the Middle East, something that I would, pull my hair out opposing, no doubt. But the bottom line, for the purpose of this discussion, he wants the hell out of Ukraine. It's obvious. Now, this is problematic for the EU and for Ukraine because Biden started a proxy war. Biden and his neocon cabal started a proxy war. We were the benefactor. We were the sponsor. We were the patron. Ukraine is the puppet. We're the organ grinder, and Zelensky's the monkey. Okay? And he did what monkeys do. Threw poop all over the place, right? Go to the what do they call it? The primate segment of the zoo. And trust me, don't get too close to the bars because monkeys will throw poop at you. That's what they got. It's what they do, right? Well, that's all that Zelensky has done. He's run around begging for money, threatening people, turning off people's gas, just getting on people's nerves, generally being a pain in the butt. And Trump doesn't like him, clearly. And Trump wants out of Ukraine, clearly. He wants out. Again, it's starting to look like that the way Trump gets out, really, at some point, and this may be the only way out for a person who's the president of the United States, is to, at some point, as they say, fish or cut bait, right? At some point. And I think that's what the 100 days is about, to be quite frank, because you can see the pummeling that Ukraine is taking on the battlefield. You just wait 100 days and say, okay, tell you what you do, you Zelensky, you want to talk? No, I'm not talking to the Russians. Here's what I'm going to do. I'll be over here chilling out for 100 days. You sit over there and watch the Russians batter the living crap out of your army. And then after 100 days, we'll see if you're ready to talk then. Right? It's like the old movies where somebody's being tortured to talk and the guy says, I won't talk. And then, the guy in charge of torture takes a cigarette and goes, I'm going to walk in the other room. I'll be back in an hour. Old, whatever the guy's name, the bad guy, old Zeke there is going to work you over. Maybe you'll be ready to talk when I come back. Out the door he goes. And of course, the poor bastard who's being questioned, they grab him and they give him the business, and they slap him around and they put a cigarette out on this. They do all that kind of stuff, right? They torture him, they threaten him. They take out some pliers and tell him, okay, when the boss comes back, if you don't talk, we're going to yank your fingernails off one at a time. After we shove bamboo under him, you're not going to be, then we drill your teeth. Everything bad's going to happen, right? So you get worked over for a while to soften up the old beachhead, right? So you'll be ready when the boss comes in, you're laying there bloody and beaten, and the boss looks at it and says, you ready to talk there yet, scumbag? Slaps you a couple times. You're ready to talk. You've had enough. You talk, or maybe you don't, whatever. But I think that's part of what's happening with Zelensky. I think that the Trump team maybe realizes that Ukraine's not soft enough yet, that they need to be softened up a little bit. Maybe another 100 days in the field with the Russian army, the old Red Army, right? Yeah, we'll leave them 100 days in the field with the Red Army. Maybe they'll be ready to talk after that. But right now, Zelensky's still cocky. Yes, Putin is doing terrible things and he must be stopped. We're not going to give up an inch of ground. Dude, you're losing kilometers of ground every minute. You're not going to you're not going to give up an inch of ground. You're going to give up hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers of ground because it's going to be taken from you. It is being taken from you. You're doing a lot of talking while your poor kidnapping victims of soldiers are being dragged out to the front lines to be obliterated by artillery. So I guess it's easy for you to talk. You're just running around in a green monkey suit while the generations of Ukrainians get obliterated. A sad state of affairs, I might add. And might I add this, it kind of plays into the Russians' hand in a real twisted and sick kind of way. And here's what I mean. Let's face it. I mean, I don't know any other way to put this because it's not a nice thing to say, but it is in fact a reality. We must face realities on the battlefield, my friend. And this is one that ain't pretty. Look, At the end of this conflict, and all conflicts come to an end. I mean, could this be the 100-year war? Sure, but even that ended after 100 years, right? At the end of this conflict, one of the concerns that the Russians will have is a reconstituted Ukrainian army, right? One of the issues that they'll have is that that the West comes back in, starts arming the Ukrainian youth, builds the army of young Ukrainians back up and arms them, and they're ready to go toe to toe with the Ruskies again, right? That's an issue with the Russians. But let me ask you this. Can the West rearm and rebuild a Ukrainian military if all the Ukrainian males of military age are dead? No, they can't. And as troublesome as it is for me to make this statement, as sad and as morbid as it is for me to say this, as Zelensky leaves his guys out in the field to get obliterated, as far as the Russians are concerned, when they get finished, they can just go home. I mean, let's face it. What is the West going to do? All right, we're going to put together a Ukrainian military to fight the Russians again. All men of fighting age show up right here, and there's an empty street. And they're like, "Hey, where's all the men of fighting age?" And the women of fighting age come up and say, "They're in the cemetery. If you want to get them, you're going to have to dig them all up. You're going to have to exhume their bodies because, remember that proxy war you had where you kept kidnapping all the men of fighting age and sending them to the front lines? Yeah, you were very successful. And you sent them to the front lines, and just the way you sent your tanks and you sent your anti-aircraft systems and all of that equipment you sent to the front lines, and the Russians blew it to hell. Well, the people that were running those tanks and armored personnel carriers and all of those other things, they got the same treatment. There ain't nobody left. So there won't be a proxy army if there's no army to proxy, whatever that is. So my point is, as sad as it is, the Russians are wiping out the men of fighting age and pre-fighting age and post-fighting age, because let's face it, the Ukrainians are sending people my age in, right? Guys with like aluminum walkers are on the battlefield, for God's sake. So my point is, this proxy army against Russia has turned into a situation what I'm not happy about, but all I can do is report it. Whereas the Ukrainians are getting wiped out, and there's going to be nothing to reconstitute. There's going to be, what are they going to say? Well, the Ukrainians have to be neutral. Well, it's hard for the Ukrainians to be neutral. Why? Because there's no Ukrainians left. Well, there was a lot of Ukrainian women, but they've gone off to find a husband in another land because there are none here. Remember, they used to have these things on air, find yourself a Ukrainian wife, she'll teach your kids how to goose step at a young age. Well, guess what? Yeah, they're going to get a lot of clicks on that, buddy, because the only hope for a Ukrainian woman to have a husband will be to find someone from another country. She's going to have to find them from, I don't know, Delaware, as an example. Try Delaware. Ukrainian women appear to be pretty women, a lot of good-looking women, a little on the goose-steppy side. So you might want to culturally consider whether or not you want to marry a woman who's got 2 kids and one of them's name is Adolf, right? Yeah, you might want to think about that. I'm just saying she might not raise your 2 sons that came along with this Ukrainian wife may go in a direction that you might find alarming at some point. You start seeing them getting tattoos that are the iconography of the Third Reich. You should be concerned. But Ukrainian women are pretty. Maybe you'll be happy with a Nazi mistress. I don't know, but that seems the way the things are going in Ukraine. That's going to be the options for Ukrainian women. Husband from somewhere else. They move out of the country, whatever the case may be, because the only option is going to be to work in a field for BlackRock, who, by the way, has bought all the Ukrainian land up in Western Ukraine. So, at any rate, but let's get back to my point. I'm getting away from my point. We are at a point now, and it's just weird to think about. And I don't know that I've ever seen this, that historically, that I can see a point where that happened, right? There have been instances where someone came in and there was a war and they wanted to get out of the war, things like that, right? You remember Obama came in and they said, all right, let's get out of Afghanistan. And they came with this surge idea, right? Remember the infamous surge? It was, let's get out of Afghanistan. And Obama said, yes, let's get out of Afghanistan. Elect me. I'll get you out of Afghanistan. And they were like, okay, what's your plan? To send more troops in Afghanistan. I mean, what a piece of crap Obama was. Talk about a double talking crook. His plan to get us out of Afghanistan was called the surge. For some reason, that doesn't sound like the kind of plan that ends a war. What are you going to do? Okay, we're getting out. I told you, Obama, he had his Nobel Prize for Peace. So, the guy had a great plan. What's your plan, Obama? We're going to send more troops in Afghanistan. That ought to end the war. That's what we normally expect, right? We go from, it wasn't a war, it was an occupation, right? So it wasn't even really an occupation. We were just running around shooting goat herders and farmers and stuff like that. Innocent people most of the time, blowing up, with drones, innocent civilians, things of that nature, which we're pretty good at, I might add. And we've trained Israel quite well. But my point being, generally that's what you get. One guy comes in, he lies. He says, if you vote for me, I'll end the war. And we vote for him and he doubles down, right? As soon as he gets in, you realize you've been had. Trump has come in. I don't know what happens a month from now, 2 months from now. But I can tell you right now, he appears to want the hell out. He just appears to really want out. His body language, his posts, everything to me says, I don't like this conflict. It has been nothing but a headache for me, and I want out, and I got bigger fish to fry, perhaps in Greenland, right? So now, what's interesting is this was a NATO proxy war, so-called NATO proxy war. A lot of things will be exposed here. So it was a NATO proxy war. As you know, my argument is that NATO, holy crap, my little wooden pin, that NATO is a umbrella organization that the U.S. uses to bring in all its putsy little vassals from Europe together so that it can take, power, take charge of their foreign policy, right? And that it isn't real, that NATO's not real. It's just that the U.S. says NATO. The U.S. means the U.S. For instance, if NATO is real and NATO is meant to protect the NATO alliance countries from its adversaries, then why the hell did the United States attack Germany and blow up its infrastructure? Kind of belies the argument that they're there to defend Germany, doesn't it? So my point being, NATO is kind of being exposed here, but in reality, is it a NATO proxy war? Yes, it is. And now NATO, and by NATO, I mean the United States, wants the hell out. Now, here's the thing. Here's what's interesting about it. Here's what's really interesting. The country that is actually NATO, that controls this umbrella organization of NATO, the United States, wants out. But the vassals, the colonies, don't want out. They want to continue. They want this thing to go on. Now, they don't want to fight Russia themselves. They're except the idiots, and there's no shortages of them. But they want Ukraine to fight Russia. And ideally, they'd like to drag the United States in. And they'd like the United States to fight Russia. But they know that they are not in a position to take Russia on. But they want to try to continue to pretend that they are under the protection of the United States. They want to say, we're going to antagonize Russia. We're going to commit terrorist acts against Russia. We're going to just overall make Russia's life a living hell as best we can under the protection of the United States, under the umbrella protection of the United States. Now the U.S., at least in the form of Donald Trump, don't want it no more. What a disaster for the European Union. And one of the reasons, big deals, reasons that it is a disaster is because the ruling elite have caused the people of Europe, their constituents, to suffer greatly. And they argued to their constituents they had to suffer now or suffer later. Either we do this now, or if the Russians win in Ukraine, then when they win, they will attack you, Germany and Denmark and France and whatever the Monaco, I don't know, whatever the hell, right? But so the people have suffered greatly and they're getting tired of suffering. But what happens if Trump says, I'm out, it's yours? And they can't, they certainly, Europe has neither the financial nor the military wherewithal to continue this conflict. They don't have the money to do it, and they don't have the stuff to give Ukraine. And if they had the money to buy the stuff from the US doesn't have the stuff. We can't supply it. We just don't have it. So they're quickly approaching a situation where they're out of money, they're out of weapons, and they're out of time. And what do they say? How do you tell the people of Europe that you must be economically obliterated? You must give up your way of life, your culture, everything that you thought was made life worth living in your country. You got to give all of that up to protect yourself from the evil Russians, because the Russians are coming to get you. And Donald Trump goes and gets a handshake deal with the Russians. And then people say, hey, the Russians coming to get us. But the Russians are like, what the hell are you talking about? And Trump's going to be like, whatever, maybe sometime in the future, keep buying weapons from us, suckers. Oh, by the way, you can continue to buy LNG gas from us at 4 times the price that the Russians spent, because you're suckers. And that's the way suckers get treated, right? So, of course, at some point, the people of Europe will be like, hey, can we get that cheap Russian gas back? And their leaders will be like, no. So they'll want to vote in new people. And then they got to convince the Russians, who may not be thrilled with, putting them back on the contract for gas. They got problems. But the biggest problem they have now is it is a proxy war. And they have talked big trash. They've talked much smack about Russia, how weak Russia is. They're evil, they're stupid, they're whatever. They're fighting with shovels, they're running out, they're throwing human waves. All of this propaganda about the weakness of the Russian military and how easy they would be to defeat. And they had a contradiction. The contradiction was the Ukrainian army is easily defeating an inept, bungling, unarmed Russian military who fights with nothing but shovels. These hordes of subhumans who have only crude gardening tools to fight with. I mean, think about that, right? They have barely crude gardening tools. They're knuckle-dragging subhumans with crude gardening tools fighting against the modern army of Ukraine, which means they'll surely lose. And that's the same thing Charles the 12th and Hitler and Napoleon. Yeah, they all believed that, but it didn't work out well for any of them. I mean, the propaganda sounds nice. Yes, the Russians are fighting with crude gardening tools. And then you lose, and people are like, how did we lose to some people that you told me only had crude gardening tools? By crude gardening tools, what do you mean? Oreshnikov missiles? Not so crude and ain't good for gardening. But for some reason, the Europeans were convinced that, oh, by the way, I don't think the Oreshnikov missile is run by a chip that was pulled from a washing machine. Remember that? The Russians are running out of chips, and they have to take washing machines. Why washing machines? They take the chips out of washing machines and use them for missiles. Wow, I will tell you this. I don't know a lot about hypersonic missiles, but if a washing machine chip will run if a hypersonic missile will run off of a washing machine chip, trust me, that's the Russians got some hella technology, because that ain't a whole lot of computer power. What next? One of these old Casio watches that also has like a it has like, gives you like the time and the weather, and it's like $8 or something, has a calculator on it. What are you going to take the chips out of the old Casio watch? $8. I literally, those things that they have for kids where you put a quarter in and this little hand comes down and you try to grab a toy, right? They used to have like Casio watches and calculators in that. You try to win a calculator or Casio watch. So I guess we'll use those also. The Russians are out of washing machines, Casio watches. That's the answer. That's where they'll get their chips to run a hypersonic missile. And a hell of a feat it is to run a hypersonic missile off of a washing machine or Casio watch chip, but somehow the Russians have figured out how to do it. Hell, next thing you know, they'll have an AI like deep sea. I mean, if they're able to do that, then God knows what they're going to do with AI, right? The washing machine missiles, maybe that's what a Oreshnikov means. All the time, we thought it meant hazelnut or something, and it really means washing machine. Anyway, so I digress. Let's get back to this thing. So what the hell are the Europeans going to do? They're caught in their own lies. And they aren't caught in their own lies with the Russians. The Russians knew they were lying all along. They're not caught in their own lies with the Ukrainians. They're all dead. Who are they caught in their lies with? Their own people, the people of Europe. When the people of Europe figure out that they've been schnookered and that there ain't no way out for them because Russian, look, the leader of Poland just recently said, I think that all of Nord Stream should be destroyed. That way, even now, and you got to love this logic. He must have been talking to Alan and Baerbock. These people have nothing but contempt for their constituents. They despise their constituents, which you expect a lot from the ruling elite, right? So apparently the leader of Poland, we'll call, I don't know his name, we'll call him Schmucky the Clown. He said, yes, Nord Stream should be destroyed because the European people might ask for it again. Think about this. Think about the logic. That is democracy in Europe. The people who vote, the people who pay our salaries if I'm the president, the people who chose me, who gave me my job, the people who are counting on me to look out for their best interests may want to maintain their industrial strength as a nation, may perhaps want a good job. They may want to raise their families. And if they're German, God forbid, they may want to eat a schnitzel every now and then and drink a nice stein of brewski. Great thing to do. Schnitzel and brewski. Those schnitzel and brewski days are gone. And what does old president of Poland say? Well, they should always be gone. I'm sorry, cheap energy, you don't need it. It comes from the Russians. We'd rather see you suffer. Now, if I were the Germans, I wouldn't think that the Russians were my enemies because they're trying to sell me cheap gas. I think it was the Poles. And historically speaking, I'm just saying, if you're Germany, you wouldn't be going out on a limb to assume that the Poles have some level of enmity towards Germany. Just saying, historically speaking, perhaps the Poles aren't your best friend, your best friends. Perhaps the Germans may be a little better to choose as a friend, as a business partner than the Poles. But it's up to you. You choose the way you want. All I'm telling you is this. You have a proxy war going on, and you do not have a legitimate benefactor anymore. You do not have a legitimate sponsor. And you do not look, you got a proxy war going on. You have a war going on your soil, on your economic block. What used to be an economic block, now it's an economic rock, right? But you got that. You don't have the money to pay for the war. You don't have the weapons to give to the person who's at war. You started the war, you pushed for the war. You've made enemies with the people on the other side of the war, and you've made it clear that you hate their guts and that you are extremely racist towards Russians as an ethnic group. Just absolute racism towards the Russians, not just because there's a military conflict for it. But you've literally said you can't have a Russian tree. You can't have a cat of a Russian breed. You can't read books from Dostoevsky or whoever the hell the Russian, great, brilliant Russian minds over the course of time. You can't celebrate that the Russians saved you from the Nazi barbaric fascists, which from the looks of a lot of people in Europe right now, they are, in fact, the Nazi barbaric fascists. And might I add, that's kind of who you set up now in Ukraine to go after the Russians again. But in any case, the leaders, and I use that word charitably, of the EU countries are between the devil and the deep blue sea. Now, I don't know where they go. Sometimes I don't know where they go from here. They're going to say to the U.S., please, can you keep doing it? And you can see that the direction that Trump is going. He's cutting money from everywhere. One of the things that's obvious, and that is ideologically speaking, Trump has aligned himself with the libertarian tech bros, right? There are various factions of the ruling elite in the United States, and every country has various factions of the ruling elite, right? You had people in the US that wanted to go to war with Russia, and they were about mining, and they were about gas. They were about oil, things of that nature, because Russia has a lot of those things, commodities, things like that. So they wanted to go to Russia first, war with Russia first. You had other people who were like, no, we're the industry people. Let's go to war with China first. Why? They got industry. Let's steal their industry. So these pirates were trying to figure out who to rob first. We're going to rob Russia first. No, we're robbing China first. It's rabbit season. No, it's duck season. That's where they were, right? They were arguing about who to rob first. And the tech bros, the libertarian tech bros, right, who I think are kind of aligned with Trump. I mean, a couple of things about them. They don't really want a nuclear war. These are people who are literally trying to put their consciousness into a machine so they can live forever as like AI mind machine thingies or whatever, right? Trust me when I'm telling you this. They ain't trying to die in a nuclear war. And as if you listen to any of my streams, as I say, these people got all this infrastructure in China building stuff everywhere. They ain't trying to go to war with China. The libertarian tech bros also are very much opposed to government spending. We've got to have a no government spending. Let's cut out any programs to help the poor and less fortunate. That's where the libertarian tech bros are. But they're also, let's cut money going overseas and all. They're for cutting money spending everywhere, right? That's who they are. Understand them, agree with them or don't agree with them. There are some areas I agree with them. There's some areas I strongly disagree with them. They don't give a crap. That's who's in power now. And that is what it is. And that's the direction it's going. And if you're in the United States, if you're some kind of a Democrat and you're like, I'm so angry that the libertarian tech bros are in power. Well, perhaps you shouldn't have ruled like idiots for the last 4 years. Perhaps you shouldn't have looked kind of like, I don't know, the latest Disney superhero movie. If you watch these Marvel or Disney, they look like fools. You ask yourself, what kind of an idiot would put together a movie like this and then gripe and grumble when nobody goes to see their horrible movie? Okay, that was you the last 4 years, Democrats. You ruled like idiots. You ruled like fools, and you don't even have a brain cell in your head that will allow you to accept that you did a bad job, and perhaps you lost because you really did a bad job. Instead, it's because I got to be a sexist, racist, misogynist, a transphobe, or some such crap like that. That's the only possible reason anybody could be that I didn't vote for the Democrats. But unfortunately, like it or not, you're out of here. You're done. You're toast. Your history. You're yesterday's news. And the libertarian tech bros have come to ascendancy. I think personally that they don't like so much the neocons, that they don't really want war, and that Trump is kind of working to a largest extent on behalf of the faction of the ruling elite that economically sponsored his presidency. All you got to damn do is look at the front row of his inauguration and see like $2 trillion worth of tech bros. And there were like 3 guys there. You know what I mean? I'm being facetious, but you get my point. It don't take a lot of tech bros to have $2 trillion worth of people. One little bench, and pretty much there you got it. You got Bezos, you got Zuckerberg right next to it. It was funny because Bezos is sitting there with his wife, and she's got a low-cut shirt, and Zuckerberg's like, no, I didn't look. Yeah, it didn't look right. Hey, I ain't hating on the man. That's the first time I finally saw Zuckerberg, and I'm like, Zuckerberg, he looks human. He looks human. He's a guy, and there's a woman next to him, and she's got come on. The guys in the chat, it's not that you necessarily have some devious intention, but we're guys, and if a woman sits next to us or walks up, a woman walks up, and a guy's sitting there, and a woman walks up, she's got a low, and he's like, he's, I'm not looking. His eyes keep going down there. What is that about? It's DNA. We can't help it. It's just guys. So Zuckerberg was staring at Bezos's wife's goodies. I finally had some respect for Zuckerberg. I'm like, well, at least he's a human being, for God's sake. At least he actually has DNA. So he's not a machine after all. My God, I was shocked, right? At any rate, so bottom line is, so that's where we are. That's where we are right now. The libertarian tech bros have risen to ascendancy in the U.S. They got Trump in there, and he's going to do a lot of libertarian stuff. Right? And libertarian stuff is getting disentangled from wars. Look, I got a lot of issues with the libertarians, but that ain't one of them. Okay. One thing I'll say about the libertarians, for the most part, they ain't big on wars. I ain't saying they're perfect. Yeah, I got disagreements with them. They got disagreements with me, but we can agree war ain't a good thing. So I've done a lot of good work with libertarians as far as anti-war stuff. And I've really enjoyed that and met some really good people and some good friends that are libertarians that we can come together when it comes to anti-war stuff and really, work together. And that people should be able to do that. You guys may remember the what was it called? The Rage Against the War Machine and all that kind of stuff. That's a good thing. People coming together and having fun and hanging out. And what a blast it was. What a blast. Anyway, I don't want to get distracted. We ADD people are. So now I think to be quite frank, I think the EU people don't have any options. They're going to have to eat crow. They don't have any options because as Trump backs out, look, he doesn't have to. Really, the truth is, one of the easiest way for Donald Trump to get out of this, is kind of the Zen way, right? I'll give you a perspective of Zen, right? You're walking down it's been raining and the car's splashing and you see a puddle. You walk up and the mud is splashed in that puddle and that puddle is all cloudy and there's mud floating and all kinds of things. You want that puddle to be clear. How do you make the puddle clear? This is simple. Leave it alone and allow it to clear itself up. A lot of people talk about, we've got to fix nature. Yeah, the way to fix nature is leave it alone. There are a lot of things in life that the way to repair them is to leave them alone and allow them to do their natural repairing. A lot of people, I'm much into natural health, and I'm big into that. Eat properly, exercise, get your sun and your vitamin D3, all your natural vitamins. Now me, I do some herbal vitamins. I'm a little older guy up in the years a little bit. So I take like saw palmetto for the prostate. I take ginseng, helps keep your testosterone and various kind of things and in equilibrium and various herbal things. Some people like, if I get a cold, I might take 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day, things like that, right? And a lot of what a lot of people don't understand about natural medicine and herbal medicine oftentimes is that it doesn't fix you and it doesn't heal you. It allows your body to heal itself. It gives your body the things necessary to do what it is able to do. It's good at doing really, really well. And that is at healing itself. Don't get me wrong. If I had some weird growth on my arm and they're like, oh my God, it's got to come off. We're not going to sit around here and let this weird growth, it's like, okay, let me look here. This ain't looking good. Cut it off, right? So I'm not a guy who says I don't believe in any medicine. I mean, if my blood pressure was through the roof, don't get me wrong, there'd be a lot of things I do that help it come down. If I had like diabetic stuff going on in my blood count and my sugar, I may need to do something to address that with medicine, but I would do everything I could outside of that to let my body and help my body heal itself, right? So my point is this. Why do I say all of that? You got a problem between Ukraine and Russia. Possibly one of the ways to fix that is allow it to fix itself. Is to say to the Ukrainians, hey, Zelensky, what's happening? Oh, Zelensky, we will defeat the Russians, and we will not give up 1 inch, and then we will take back Crimea, and then we will on to Red Square, where we will put the Azov Battalion insignia up over Red Square. Putin will then be tried along with all of his evil generals, and we will blah 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 blah. And if I'm president, I'm saying, man, sounds like a hell of a plan there, Vlad. Tell you what, we're fresh out of money right now. Weapons, can't help you there. I wish if I had some extra weapons, I probably wouldn't give them to you if you really want me to be honest. But I'll just, I want you to feel good. So I'll say, yeah, give you the weapons. But, yeah, I guess, in my opinion, Russians are pretty tough hombres, buddy. I mean, historically speaking, I never really gave you a chance to beat them in the first place. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a chance now. Okay, I'm going to allow you, you feel as though that what the Russians have done is unjust, and you've got to put them in their place, straighten this situation out, and on you go to Moscow. Hey, I don't think you can do that, but I guess you're going to make a believer out of me, huh? Here, I'll tell you what you do. Here's some phone numbers. Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, Annalena Baerbock, you name it, call all of those Schultz, the one-eyed pirate, you name it. Here's their phone numbers. Give them a call. I'll be heading back to DC. I got things to do, people to meet, places to go, meetings to have, Greenland to nab. I got canals to steal from other countries. I got things to do, dude. I got stuff to do. I got French fries to make and garbage trucks to ride in. So here's what we're going to do. I've given you what we'll just call advice, friendly advice, as a matter of friendly concern. That's what it was, as a matter of friendly concern, right? I once wrote a personnel policy for the state of Maryland, and that was like the foundation of it, that in personnel issues, that you must first start by bringing up issues to an employee, quote, as a matter of friendly concern, right? Hey, you seem to be coming to work with alcohol in your breath, stumbling around, barfing every morning. As a matter of friendly concern, I'd like to ask if possibly you have an alcohol problem. We could refer you to, some kind of a help here that maybe could work with you on that addiction if you would like. Otherwise, your ass is going to get fired if you keep doing that crap, right? But it was only as a matter of friendly concern. So my point being, as a matter of friendly concern, if I'm Trump, I say to Zelensky, look, you ain't beating the Russians, dude. That's not going to happen. We don't have weapons for you. We don't have money for you. Who's going to pay the bills? Your country is going to come unglued. Those schmuck-faced idiots like Starmer and Macron and these guys, they're talking big trash, but they got nothing for you, dude. If I were you, which I'm not, I'd get on the phone with Putin and I'd make a deal. And the deal would be like this. What do you want, Putin? Well, here's my 5 demands. Only 5? Yeah. You sure you don't have anything else? Before I sign the 5 that you requested, are you sure you don't have a 6? Because if you got a 6, I'll sign that one too, because I don't want to die. That's what I'd do if I were you. Then I'd move to one of my luxury places, say maybe outside of Miami in a gated community, living next to what's his name, Guaido or something, and I'd get the hell out of Dodge. That's what I'd do if I was you. But you don't have to do that because you're a badass and you ain't putting up with that Russian crap. So I'm getting on my plane and I'm leaving. Well, actually, I wouldn't get on a plane to go there. He'd be here. I'd say, I'm getting you on a plane and you're getting out of DC. And this is it. We will shake hands. We will take a shot of something or other. Maybe, I don't know, cranberry juice. Trump's not a drinking man, but maybe cranberry juice. That's always good for a UTI, right? So I'd say, look, to old times, to me being impeached, to you backstabbing son of, to, things that we're going to put behind us so we can move forward. And let's see how things work. See you later. Have a nice day. Get out. And if you need help, don't forget, you got NATO headquarters, and none of our people are going to give up with a dime. They already have instructions. So you got NATO headquarters that you can call, but it ain't going to do you no good if you got to get it from us. And you got a bunch of guys in the EU, but they don't have any money or weapons. But at any rate, you don't need that stuff. You've already made it clear you're going to defeat the Russians as is with what you have. You might end up fighting with shovels and common garden utensils. What a great irony we have there. At any rate, thank you very much. Have a nice day. That's where we are. That's where we are. A proxy army with no benefactor. A proxy army with no sponsor, with no patron. How does that work out in the real world? Let me just end by saying this. If there is no patron, no benefactor, no sponsor, there is no proxy war, which means that once Donald Trump came in here and began searching for an exit, it is not a proxy war. There's no proxy war if the sponsor of the war feels trapped. If the sponsor of a war is like, I want out, oh God, what's Trump saying? He's not saying, how can I stay in? He's saying, how can I get out? What is the people? Geez, how can we? What did Marco Rubio say at the behest of Trump? Hey, it's time to bring this thing to a close. We're going to get the hell out of here, right? That's not a promising sign for the neo-Nazis in Azov Battalion and the rest of them, and right sector, etc. When your boss, when your patron, when your sponsor says we're ready to go, you better pack your bags. I don't think they're going to do it. So all I can say is this on the way out. Trump, if you're listening, which you ain't, just leave them alone and they'll come home. No, all jokes aside, just leave these people alone. Just give them a phone call and tell them we ain't paying for your media no more because we don't care what you think. We literally sponsor their 90% of the media in the same way that the government's sponsoring 90% of the media here. We don't care what you think. So we're not paying for your media anymore. We're not paying for your policemen and your firemen. We're not paying for your heating oil and your gas. We're not paying the salaries of Zelensky and these other thieves, Zelensky and the 40 thieves. No, we're not paying for that anymore. But we won't stand in your way. In fact, we'll stand 7,000 miles out of your way in Washington, D.C. Have a nice day. We're done. I think that's what I think that's the direction things are going, but we shall see. Let's look. I think, don't forget, you guys, we now have a join button. A join button. Click on the join button, and you can become a member. It's like $4.99 a month or so, $5 a month. Also, there's other options. PayPal, buy me a coffee is always a great option. Cash App, you name it. You can see it all scrolling across the bottom. Patreon, of course. Let us begin. We're going to look. We always get lots of great questions on the super chat. That's where we're going. Do you believe the U.S. has lost the arms race? Yes, it's going broke in a way, and our manufacturing is uncompetitive. Yes, it is uncompetitive. It's going broke. In real terms, we are, because we're in a situation where all we can do is print money. Everything, we got to print our way out of it. And, I just have the feeling that ain't going to last forever, because as long as people want your money, you can print lots of it. Even then, it causes a significant amount of inflation. So we got problems. And of course, now that the tech bros are in, it is austerity time. So they're going to cut everything for the poor. They're going to cut everything for the people and say, oh boy, good news. We're balancing the budget, but the people are going to suffer. And there's going to be pushback against that. So we're in a mell of a hess. I'll say that. But we're still here. But Europe is in much worse shape than us. Much worse. Francois says, you have a very U.S. regime perspective on the conflict. It really doesn't matter what the Trump's opinion is. The U.S. regime is ultimately responsible for the conflict, and they will eventually pay. I agree. We're going to, the U.S. is going to walk away from it, but we're going to pay in a lot of ways. And we're already paying in a lot of ways, because the people around the world are looking. Everybody around the world is looking at this freaking disaster, and they're saying, oh my God, look what you did in Gaza. Oh my God, look what you did in Ukraine. Bottom line is this. I'll put it differently. It's not that the U.S. will eventually pay. The U.S. is being exposed for what they are. That's all it is. We're being exposed. People know us. You will know us by our actions and what's really going on. That's one way to put it, that the U.S. will eventually pay. But we could also say that everybody knows who we are. So when the U.S. goes to do a deal, countries are going to say, you think we're going to do a deal with you? We don't trust you. Everybody's going to say, we want to go to BRICS. Well, why do we want to go to the U.S.? Are you kidding me? They blew up the Nord Stream. They blew up the infrastructure of one of their so-called allies. I don't want to be an ally with those bastards. They might blow up our infrastructure. So yes, the U.S. is going to pay for a long time in a lot of ways, not because of what we did, but as the old saying goes, what you are is screaming so loud I can't hear what you're saying, right? So what we did is one thing, but what it demonstrates about the character of the United States as an empire, as a country, as an entity, is very, very powerful, and we will pay. And one of the ways we're going to pay is BRICS is going to grow, and the U.S. dollar is going to wilt on the vine. Rolf, my man, Blinken tried to assassinate Putin as per Tucker Carlson. Absolutely. Apparently. Excuse me, I think I did a video about that. Pardon me for yawning, but yes, it'd be interesting to find out about that. And certainly, I believe that we will find out many, many things that the Biden administration did that we will literally crap ourselves, as Joe Biden does daily, as he soils his trousers on a daily basis. Well, that we will join him in soiling our own trousers when we find out just how close we were to nuclear annihilation as a result of those absolute lunatic. And I feel this, the Trump people are probably shocked right now, the things they're uncovering, the money that was spent, the absurdities that were done by the Biden administration. I'm going to do a video later, I think today, to talk about what needs to be investigated. But you're right. That's been reported. We don't know it for sure, but it seems to make sense. Okay. He also said that Blinken was running things for the last couple of years. You're an errand boy sent by grocery clerks, Rolf Steiner. All right. Wonderful. Thank you, Garland. Will you apply for White House Press Pass now that Trump is allowing podcasters? Yes, I certainly will. Thank you very much, Vivian. Messiah Trump is going to visit the Wailing Wall, and he'll be wailing a lot more before it's all done. Kushner Gaza beachside resorts built by Trump and company. We shall see. I suspect the money for rebuilding is going to, I really believe it's going to come from, you watch, it's going to come from the Saudis / BlackRock. How Trump explained didn't resolve Ukraine in 24 hours. Well, here's the thing. Let me say, I'm glad you asked that. People err in taking what Donald Trump says literally. What Donald Trump is a showman, and he says things for show, and he says things for effect. He doesn't say things because he literally means them. Donald Trump, when he says they'll be done in 24 hours, what he means is I'm going to get it done fast. He had no thoughts of whether or not he was getting it done in 24 hours. That was a kind of like, you know, they run a trailer before for movies to get you to buy, go watch, pay to watch the movie. They do things, they release Star Wars action figures prior and all these things to get you to go see Star Wars. That's all Trump's comments. Like, I'm going to do this in 24 hours. I'm going to win this. I'm going to take this. I'm going to do this like nobody's ever done before. Those are all statements that Donald Trump is making just to get you to vote for him so he can win. That's all it is. So we can't, please all be very wary of taking Donald Trump's statements literally. Vivian, your thoughts on the fate of Assad from Syria? I don't really know. I have no idea. I wish I had some thoughts. He's apparently in Moscow, and a lot of propaganda against him. I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen in Syria with the whole Syria thing, and with Assad. I wish I had a better answer than that. Rolf, the American people refuse to fight Yankee tyranny. There we go. We've had no shortage of that over the last. How about during COVID, for God's sake? Raphael, hey, what's happening? He says, when will Putin do something with Zelensky? How can you let a man dish you every day and not doing something? Does he have pride and respect for his name? I think Vladimir Putin is not about Vladimir Putin. He's about Russia. And I think Vladimir Putin would not hesitate to sacrifice his own personal, I'm not going to say self-respect. I'll put it like this. If he's got to choose between doing what's in the best interest of Russia, the entity Russia, the nation Russia, and the Russian people, and clearing his name, he'll take a punch. I think Vladimir Putin will certainly take a punch for his country if he feels it's necessary for him to take a punch for his country. So I don't think he's going to be like, he dissed me personally. Now, Trump, you dissed Trump personally. He wants some get backs, brother. He wants some revenge. I think Putin has a lot more depth to him than that. Remember, the guy's a trained attorney, and he has a PhD in economics. Come on. You know what I mean? I mean, he's probably, just say a bit past personal, protection of his ego. All right. Andrea, the Ukraine war will end when Russia wants it to end. I think Trump has finally understood that. I think he does too. I think so too. That's why I think he's going to end up realizing, look, let's just let this thing go for a few months, 100 days, whatever. Let's let the Ukrainians get punched around a little bit. And as this thing starts to crumble, I'll come back to him and say, you ready to talk yet? If not, they ain't. We'll just put some fake sanctions. Yes, we're going to sanction Russia. They can't send us watermelon anymore. Yeah, but the Russians don't grow watermelons. And that's it. See ya. We're out. Hey, Macron, yeah, handle it up, bro. Handle it up. We're done. So I think that's what we're looking at. All right. Let me look at Rockfin. Okay. And we're going to take a peep and see, is there any Rumble rant? Any Rumble rants? No Rumble rants. I guess that's it. All right. Thanks a lot, you all, as I said before. As I said in the past, thank you very much. And of course, share this on all your social media platforms. Additionally, if you can, you see everything there: Patreon, PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, you name it. Please, anything you can do to help the channel is appreciated. And if you can't, don't worry about it. Keep all the money for your family and just share this on all your social media platforms. Peace. I'm out.